It's the computer. Hello and welcome to IQ session number 93.
Wow.
93 is my fact checker on. Erin, am I correct? Yes, we are correct. Excellent. And today is all about food to create a better understanding. Now, if you've done challenges and things with us before, we've definitely covered macros before. However, we're going to be touching on macros today, but we will go into more depth over the next coming couple of weeks as well. But today we wanted to really dive into simplifying food and getting a better understanding of food as a whole. Not just as the macros and all that kind of thing. And I've gone through all the pulse checks. I actually read them, go me. And a lot of you have said that you want a better understanding of food anyway, which is amazing. So hence this is definitely tailored for you and can be watched and listened to at any point. But if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as we go. I'll also open up for questions at the end as well. But if you want to write them in the chat so you don't forget them, etc., etc. So I'm going to start off super basic with what is food? First of all, food is fuel. The only purpose of food is to fuel our body. So if we were to refer to our body as like a car, some cars run off diesel, some cars run off unleaded petrol, some cars function better off 98, some cars function fine off 90. It doesn't mean that diesel or diesel's bad or petrol's bad. It's just we function better off different types of fuel, right? And it's the same goes for us as humans. Just like some of us prefer to do different types of exercise and stuff, the way that we eat isn't this. It's not like a box theory. Like it's not a one size fits all when it comes to food. So that's why we really want to, I guess one of our goals when it comes to these challenges is we really want to simplify food so that you guys don't have to have, because so many people that we know have hang-ups on food because our profession, our industry has made it so friggin' complicated of what do you eat? How much do you eat? This is bad. This is good. And there's a lot of shame and guilt around food when there really shouldn't be, because reality is it's fuel. And yes, it should be enjoyed, but what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. And that's why when people preach a certain diet plan or whatever it might be, that yes, that's work for them, but it might not necessarily work for you and your body. And I want to touch on points of why that might be the case as well tonight. But really just want to give you guys a deeper understanding of food so that you can understand that food doesn't have to be complicated. There shouldn't be guilt and shame around food. And we can really make it quite simple and eat the foods that you love, because life's too freaking short to eat shit food. But let's eat the food that's right for us and to give you the, a performance as well, because I'm going to take a leap of faith here and presume that no one wants to feel shit every day. So eating for performance, whether you're an athlete or not, is kind of important so that you can get as much out of your day as possible.
Yeah, I love it. I think the big one you touched on there too is the guilting and the shaming of food. And feeling that, having that really toxic relationship with it. And that's because, and we have to take full ownership because we're a part of the industry. Our health and fitness industry has made it so damn complex. We say this all the time, but everyone is on their high horses with what's right, what's wrong. But the reality is, like Sharon said, is that it's what's right and what's wrong for you. And we're going to teach you all about that today and say, cool, how do you make sure that you're paying attention what works for your body? Because they are very, very different. There's no one clean cut for everyone.
Yep. Exactly. I'm just going to put on an extra light here just so we can get a little bit more. That's going to look a bit creepy, but we like it. We like creepy, don't we? All right. So first of all, food is fuel, and it is a mix of macronutrients and micronutrients. A lot of people have heard things about macros. You got to get your macros, got to get your macros. Reality is first things first is we need to approach calories. And that's why when we do an 8-week challenge, the first half of the challenge is just about hitting your calories, because if you can't get that right, you're not going to, the macros are kind of irrelevant because calories come first and they're the most important thing.
Can I jump in on that real quick too, on the calorie side of things? Sorry to cut you off, but one of the things is, this is controversial in our health and fitness industry too, where people say you shouldn't count calories, right? Now, the reason you do count calories is because we're not disciplined enough to not gauge food properly. So what it does is it gives us a metric and a measurement so that we can stay contained within a range to make sure that we don't blow it out. So controversially, it says that calorie counting isn't good for you because it becomes obsessive and stuff like that. But the challenge is that it gives you a good framework to stay within. And
I also think the reason is because typically when it's calorie counting has come into play, it's been in an extreme deficit. So many people, when they speak of calories, they reference eating 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. And I guarantee every single one of you, when you've worked out the magic number, your calories number is a lot higher than 1,200, because counting calories has typically been about starvation. And we're not about that, because that's not performance. Remember, we're all about being, peak performance here, whether you are an athlete or whether you just want to be a freaking awesome human and get through the day full of energy, your emotions in check, your hormones steady. There's so many things that come into play when we talk about performance, and it's not just from an athletic and athlete point of view. It comes into just day-to-day life and all that kind of thing. So no matter what your goals are, performance is actually vital so that you can be a freaking awesome human being just day to day. Why not? Just be a legend. So, all right. So when it comes to calories, I want to reference a car again, because you know me, I love my metaphors.
Oh, yeah.
If your car has a 90-litre tank, you can't put 120 litres in, right? Just doesn't work. And that's why calories are so important, because our tanks have a certain number to them, and that's our calorie number. That's our magic number that we've all worked out when it comes to the 8-week challenges. If you haven't done an 8-week challenge and you would like to know more about that, please reach out to me and I can send you the formula to work it all out. But we have our tank has a certain size, and the bigger we get, the bigger the tank gets, because unlike a car, our tanks can grow, which means so can our vehicle. If you don't want the vehicle to grow, there's a certain number that you need to stick to. But also, if you skimp on the petrol in a car, it's probably not going to run too well either. Like if you run out of fuel, it kind of doesn't go so well.
Bounces around.
So first of all, calories are always first. The reason why they're first is because it's energy in versus energy out, regardless of what the macros are and stuff like that. Don't overcomplicate it. This is why we attack calories first, because if your number, let's say, is 2,000 calories per day, and you eat 2,000 calories, your body's going to function. Cool. Doesn't matter if it's 2,000 calories of fat, of protein, of good foods, bad foods, all that kind of thing. 2,000 calories is the first thing that you need to make sure you're attacking. Because if you eat 4,000, your vehicle's going to increase in size, right? First things first, calories are first.
Perfect.
Would you like to add anything onto that?
No, I think that's perfect. You've summed that up very well with your car analogies.
Are you liking that I get to talk so much to these people so I don't have to talk as much to you?
It is a pleasure to see the words drain out of your vocab.
All right, so next we're going to look at macros briefly. Now, over the next couple of weeks, we've got some specific macronutrient videos coming out to help explain them a little more. But people get really wrapped up on macronutrients, and people, especially in the fitness industry, have said, oh, I look like this because I do my macros. No, you look like this because you're disciplined. Discipline is the basis of looking good, right?
Yep.
Discipline enough to move enough, to eat the right amount, and to eat for performance, et cetera, et cetera.
And they're consistent. Disciplined and consistent.
Yes. Yeah. But what we want to do now is show you how you can use, explain what macros are first and foremost, but then how you can use them to tweak and to sharpen your tools. Cool?
Cool.
Yeah?
I like it.
Excellent. All right. First things first. Carbohydrates, the love of my life. Hallelujah. All you people that give carbs a bad rap, I'm insulted, highly offended. However, carbs have been given a bad rap over the years because of our silly profession and all the misinformation that it spreads. Carbs are your friends. However, there's there's different forms of carbohydrates. So I want to clear up this first and foremost. Carbohydrates, first of all, the basics, 4.5 calories per 1 gram of carbohydrate. Cool. Carbohydrates is literally the body's preferred energy source. So remember, we've spoken about food is fuel. So fuel is energy in, that's our fuel type. And carbohydrates are the preferred source for the body and the only source that your brain can function off. So if you're restricting carbohydrates, you can quite possibly, you can definitely expect to have brain fog, to be a little bit slow and a little bit like flighty and loopy. I've experienced it with old mate over here.
Now, I think what people, and correct me if I'm jumping the gun here, but with the carbohydrates thing really quickly on that, is that people get mixed up between bread and rice and pasta being carbs. And then they forget that vegetables, fruits, and all the other things that come from the ground are also carbs. They're in the same bracket. So the challenge is that the misconception is when people say carbs are bad, they're literally referring to packaged food. That's their interpretation, again, because our fitness industry has done that to it. But that's what people assume are carbs, are lollies and chocolates and rice and bread and all those things and pasta and things like that. But carbohydrates are fruits and vegetables. Now we know as well. But we know that from even growing up as little kids, before the complex analogies of the fitness profession came into play, that fruits and vegetables are great for the body, right? So we know that carbohydrates are not bad because they are a source required to fuel the body.
Exactly. So there's two types of carbohydrates. I'm going to really simplify this. There's no need to be like, we're not going to go too deep. We're just going to be super simple with this. Know what we need to know. There's complex carbs and there's simple carbs. Now, this is where the whole carbs are bad things comes in to play, because simple carbs, these are like your heavily processed foods, like your sugars, so your lollies, your breads and pastas and all that kind of thing. These simple carbs will spike your blood sugar level because carbohydrates are literally just sugar to the body, and they're fuel. Once a carbohydrate enters into the body, it gets changed into glucose. Thank you, which is just sugar in the body. So simple carbohydrates, they will spike your blood sugar levels. They give you a quick burst of energy, but then you'll also experience a quick crash as well. Then you've got complex carbohydrates. These are ones that take a lot longer to digest, so they don't spike your blood sugar level. They're a lot more slow release energy. And these are things like your carbohydrates from nature, so the things that haven't been touched by man. So you've got your potatoes. Oh, we love potatoes. Potatoes, fruit, vegetables, all those kind of things that are carbohydrates. So whenever anyone says they've cut carbs from their diet, I am highly offended, and I highly think that you shouldn't, or you're just misinformed about what you're cutting. You can cut processed foods, which that, to limit those is totally fine. But I'm pretty sure if you go back to, what's true for the body, fruits and vegetables are pretty good for your body. So cutting those would probably be a silly idea, right?
Exactly. And can I, on that one there too, on the carbohydrates, is because it is processed by man, we know that it's been manipulated to create something to taste good. So it needs flavor and additives and all these different things that we do not know what goes into it. We just know that it tastes good as it enters our mouth. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that if you like the subject. So if it's bread and you like bread, then continue to eat the bread, but just pay attention to how much the bread is. However, the more fruits and vegetables that you can get into your body, obviously are going to have a benefit to you coming up. And we'll talk about, are we doing macros? Yep. Okay, cool. Awesome. But the easiest way to do this is, if you, a real simple philosophy, remember, we don't want to overcomplicate it, is shop around the outside of the supermarket. Predominantly, you'll find that most things that are relatively untouched by man are around the outskirts of it. So you're more likely to hit it right if you scoot around the outside, if you're eating for performance, because the performance of those long, sustaining, slow burning energy, they all sit around the outside of the thing. The oil-based stuff is those simple carbohydrates that Sheridan's talking about, which will spike you. They're all in the aisles. So if you can avoid the aisles. Now, remember, none of these, one thing we want you to take from this is there's no such thing as bad foods. Nope. There's just too much or too little of something. So again, carbohydrates, they are not bad. Even simple carbohydrates that spike your blood sugar level,
totally not bad if you have the right amount of them. With anything, you've got to enjoy your food. You've got to have the things you love, because life is about enjoyment. But understanding why your body responds the way it does, or why you feel the way it does, why you feel the way you do, it comes from a better understanding of what food actually is and what it does to your body. And so you can understand the responses you're getting from the foods you're eating. So simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates are your untouched things. And what else have I got there? Your starches, so whole grains, legumes, starchy vegetables. They do take longer to digest and break down, so they don't spike your blood sugar levels. So the place that simple carbohydrates have is when you do need a quick burst of energy for whatever reason it might be, go for those and enjoy them as sometimes foods. Totally fine. But again, there is no such thing as bad food. Do we need to cover anything else on carbohydrates? Number one fuel source for the brain. So if you're flighty.
Oh, actually, sorry, on carbohydrates real quickly. This is one of those ones. This is the reason it gets such a bad name. Sorry, I should have known this. They get a bad name because the carbohydrates in the body have the ability to change the molecules to turn into fat. So this is why our fitness industry cottoned onto this. They said, oh, carbs turn into fat. So carbs are bad because you don't want to be fat. You want to be healthy, fit, and strong. Fat is not good. So they had this whole hang up on carbs turn into fat, so they are bad. That is the message that got put out there, and everyone bought into it going, yeah, right, carbs are bad, because it was the reason they were justifying why they had fat in their body, because of the carbs. It was nothing else to do with the ill discipline that they had in their lives. They were putting it and blaming something like carbohydrates. So this hang up on carbs are bad because they turn to fat, that has to change, because the process in which it takes to turn a carbohydrate into fat, yes, the body can do it, but it is a hell of a process to change a molecule and turn it into fat.
And we're talking, you need an abundance of excess carbohydrates for the body to even consider doing that. Yep. Like we're talking like 9,000, is it 1,000 times the amount that your body needs, or something like that? I don't know
the exact number, but there was a study that was done, and we've shared this before, which is great, but it was done, they gave a person, so remember, when the carbs go into the body, they get turned into glucose. So what they did is they gave this person 3 liters of glucose, right? Your body can hold about 450 grams, so say 450 mils of carbohydrates at any one time. They gave them 3 liters, so a massive abundance of it, way too much for anyone to eat. Of all that, those liters of glucose that went into the body, only 30 grams turned into fat, which meant that all the rest was burnt off, because you need energy, and it's the natural form of energy, so it burns it off. And you need energy to change the molecule into fat, takes energy. So it kept burning off the carbohydrates. So as long as carbohydrates are in your body, they will burn off, they'll oxidize off, unless you have an abundance of carbohydrates. Now that's, like we were saying before, too much of anything, regardless of its fruit, veggies, or what, is not a good thing. Mm-hmm. So you have to have everything in moderation. So carbs are not bad. If that's your language, slap your face and stop it, because it's silly and it's not true.
Get some taties into you.
Yeah.
That's
carbohydrates
what you need.
are great for you. And if you really are battling with that language and you say, oh, carbs bad, I've cut back my carbs, call us and we'll have a wee chit chat and we'll get that out of your language pretty quick.
I'm just going to make this really plain and simple. Matt and I are not overweight or obese, and we eat about 5 kilos of potato a week between the two of us. Potatoes ain't going to make you fat. Enjoy them and their vitamin C. We're going to talk about the micronutrients shortly, but...
And we like bread.
And we like bread. Yeah, I have a sandwich most days, or a croissant, actually. Yeah. See, all the good stuff. All the good stuff. All right, that's carbohydrates. They get such a bad rap. I feel so sorry for them. And I feel like it's my purpose in life is for the world to realize the beauty of carbohydrates again. Little obsessed with carbohydrates. Anyway, next one is, so there's 4 macronutrients. We've covered carbohydrates, which is numero 1. We're going to go to fat next. Now, fat. So carbohydrates are 4.5 calories per 1 gram. Fat is 9 calories per 1 gram. So quantity-wise, you can eat half the amount of carbohydrates for the same calories. All right, fat is definitely a very important part of a healthy, balanced diet, and our body needs fat to survive. Quite literally needs it. All macronutrients are needed. It just depends on the scale and the ratio and stuff like that. Now, fat stores as fat. So if your body's not using up the energy, It literally stores as fat. Now, the remarkable thing about fat cells in the body is they have the ability to continue multiplying. So the more fat you add, if you're not burning the fuel, remember, all energy, all food is fuel, fat included is also fuel. If you're not burning it, it goes straight to Fat Town, baby. Now, there is an unlimited amount of fat cells that you can have. This is why you can see people that are like 300 plus kilos and incredibly overweight, obese, is because the body will not stop. It will keep just shooting it straight to Fat Town.
Until it kills you.
Yeah, literally.
Suffocates the organs.
There's two forms in the body. When it does store as fat, there's two types of fat stored in your body. There's visceral fat and there's subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous fat is the jiggly stuff, the stuff that sits on top. So it's the wobbly.
It's the stuff you don't like seeing when you look in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's that stuff. It's all the stuff that sits on the outside.
It's the stuff that stops you seeing your abs and that kind of thing. That's subcutaneous fat. Then there's the visceral fat. This is the fat that is super, super dangerous because it is the fat that surrounds your organs. Now, your organs are super important to you surviving and to you living, just an FYI. So having fat around them, yes, they do need, our body does need some fat. However, if you have an excess amount of fat around your organs, it's like giving them a big bear hug and squeezing tightly. So they're quite literally getting squashed like you're playing stacks on. Visceral fat, we want to keep down to a minimum, because the moment that you have excess visceral fat, your organs are put under too much stress. They have to work harder. And that's when lots of health challenges come to play.
Yeah. And real quick on that, one of the number one killers of the world is coronary heart disease, caused from an influx of fat in the body and fatty tissue and stuff like that, because the heart it's got a big responsibility, right? Its job is to keep you alive. So if you put it under pressure and suffocate it and give it a reduced area, it creates high blood pressure, which creates stress on the heart, which means that your heart is having to do more than it has to already do, which is a lot, because it's responsible for keeping you alive. So it's pretty important to give it the best environment possible so that it doesn't have to stress you out too much.
One movement that I'm not so impressed about that has really come through, semi-recently is the healthy at any size. Not necessarily true. If we have too much fat, you are quite literally putting your body at risk of, so many health problems and stuff like that. I'm not saying that you need to be lean and you have to have abs on point and be cut like a snake or look like a condom full of walnuts. I'm not saying that. However, there is a very unhealthy amount. There is an amount of fat in the body that becomes unhealthy. So healthy at any size is a total bullshit term that made up by fat people to make themselves feel better about being fat. Now, not necessarily true.
And you're going to sit there and go, well, that's all right for you because you're little and petite and all this sort of stuff there. That's what most people do. They justify that it was okay. Now, we're talking from a health point of view. We're not talking from aesthetics. We're talking about your organs require space. And if you give them a fatty environment, they're under pressure, which leads to things like coronary heart disease and all those things that do kill you. Mm-hmm. So it is important to not buy into the narrative, which is healthy at any size. It's like, yes, maybe, but you need to actually do the work to create a better environment for it. Otherwise, it could lead to an early grave, unfortunately.
Yeah. And just because someone might have a little bit more weight than others does not also mean that they are, on death row, because fitness is actually more important than your fat levels. However, we're just talking about the food side of things right now, and telling yourself that it's totally okay to be super overweight is a lie you're telling it to yourself. Sorry to slap that one in your face, but we need you to be healthy, fit and strong. And part of that is actually reducing excess fat because your organs need it. And
your body will continue to store it if you don't do anything about it. So you have to do your part in the equation and can't just assume that TV will tell you it's okay. You actually have to do a part, get yourself nice and fit so you're doing your part in the equation.
Anyway, back to the food kind of fat. All right, fat. Another one is fats in the micronutrients included in fat is your omega-3, 6, and 9s. You would have heard people say super, super important for your body. Very true. There is a couple of different types of fat, just like there's simple carbs and complex carbs. We've got, things that are referred to as bad fats and healthy fats and stuff like that. We've got saturated fats. That's number one. These are more likely from an animal. So they're more likely animal fats, and they're generally speaking solid at room temperature. So you've got things like butter and quite literally the fat and the rind off meat and stuff like that as well. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you eat too much, then it becomes bad fat. Just like anything, if you eat too many complex carbs, it becomes bad complex carbs. So limited amounts, just like anything. Then you've got trans fats. Now, these are more your ones that you really want to limit. These are your fried foods, your man-made stuff. Now, the reason why I want to avoid these kind of fats is because they quite literally promote inflammation in the body. Inflammation in the body is not ideal. Would you like to talk about that, please? Throwing you under the bus.
You have thrown me under the bus, so you're on a roll. So I wasn't in the zone there. I was waiting for the next spiel.
Throwing you a line to give you some input.
No, you're on a roll. Keep going.
Inflammation in the body is when we talk about inflammation, think about swelling. When things inside the body swells, it means that it's causing friction in the body. Things happen. It creates heat where heat doesn't need to be. There's just inflammation we want to avoid.
Yeah, you're going to have restrictions, basically. So basically, whenever you have an injury and all that sort of stuff there, it creates inflammation, which creates pain. Pain creates discomfort. Discomfort creates the reason to not move. We want to move and make sure we do that stuff. Food and certain types of fat will actually add inflammation to your body.
Exactly. Then we've got monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. These are quite often liquid at room temperature. So think your oil, your olive oils, your coconut oils and stuff like that. Then you've got nuts, oil, fish and avocado, and your omega-3, 6, and 9s are included in those as well. And so they're also another really important part to include into the diet.
To summarize that, they are all fat.
Yeah, fat is fat.
And that doesn't change a thing, good, bad, whatever it is. It still goes in, and it can only go to one place in your body, which is the fat cells, which Sheridan mentioned before. They have the ability to duplicate, multiply, and keep stacking it if you don't know how to use it.
But the amount and the kind of fat that you introduce can lead to other things like inflammations and stuff like that. So we definitely need fat in our bodies and in our diet. There's fat in our brain. We need that, all that kind of stuff. So fat is important, but understanding what fats are and why we need to limit them and all that kind of thing is super important too. Then we have protein. Protein is 4.5 calories per gram, much like the carbohydrates, exactly the same. Protein, when it comes to protein in the body, people think of protein and they think the exaggerated version. They think protein equals ripped, muscly dude at the gym and the girl that looks like the man with all the big muscles, all that kind of thing. Protein is definitely an important part of the body, but often quite misleading as to how people get to how they look. So we need protein because it is quite literally does help with, it's the building block. So builds muscles. It helps with hair, skin, nail health, all that kind of thing.
Helps repair your muscles.
Yes.
That's the main one. So when you're exercising a lot and you place those muscles under stress, they tear, little micro tears, or the protein helps repair that. That's part of it.
Yep. Cool. So protein, once it's entered the body, breaks down into amino acids, which then go in and do the work. Now, there's 3 types of amino acids once it's in the body. There's essential amino acids, non-essential, and conditional. So your essential amino acids are the stuff that actually can't be made by the body. So you actually have to consume them to make sure that your body is getting a good, healthy, balanced diet. Non-essentials, the body can produce. And then you've got conditional. Conditional amino acids are only needed in times when your body's under excess stress or it's sick or things like that, and it requires a little bit extra to help repair it and get it through. So protein, again, is really, really important. However, an excess of protein, you quite literally shit out. If you have too much protein, you literally poo it out. It does not go to the biceps. It does not go to the abs, doesn't go to the quads. It literally goes out the toilet. So you don't need to increase your protein to an excess amount to get bigger, stronger, and all that kind of thing. You do need protein in your diet to make sure that you're functioning at an optimal amount, but quite often it's not as much as people think it is. And it's not the protein in the container, the protein powder, that's making people shredded and big and muscly and strong. Now, when it comes to protein powders, do you need them? Short answer is only if you can't get the protein in a wholesome form. Now, just like anything, the least amount of touch by man that a food has is better. So a protein powder, you can't pick that off a tree or dig it up out of the ground. That's quite literally been touched by man so many times over that it does not resemble anything like its original form. Who even knows what the original form is? So protein powders, are they necessary? 100% no, unless because of dietary reasons you cannot get protein into your system, then it's definitely an option. But it's just like anything, there's always an exception to the rule. Do we have protein powders? No. We consume our protein.
And we're jacked as, bro.
We're jacked as.
Look at us.
We're
honestly.
Huge.
But I don't know if you've ever been in the bathroom after someone who's on a very high protein diet. It is not pleasant.
Where have you been hanging out?
No, when you go to, if you're ever after someone who's on a high protein diet, it is rancid because their body can't store it all. It has to go out. So they actually are quite toxically disgusting. So when you see bodybuilders and stuff like that, they're quite often, like to a degree, unhealthy because of the excess of stuff that they're actually having. But what the bodybuilders do, which you have to give them credit for, is they're extremely disciplined. They don't miss a meal.
And consistent.
And they don't miss a meal. They'll have their 6 meals a day. They'll make sure they get their, steroid in there as well and get jacked up that way. But they're very consistent. They don't miss anything.
Protein is in the forms of meats, fish, eggs, dairy, all those kind of things. And most of your foods have some portion, some element of most of those three macronutrients. The macronutrient that we're not going to touch on tonight is alcohol, because yes, it is a fuel source for the body. However, it has no nutritional value to it and is actually considered a toxin in the body, but your body does use it as fuel because it's like, fuck, we're going to get this out and we're going to burn it off straight away, which is why you can go on the D floor and go for gold. All right, so that's your 4 macronutrients. This is what your food is broken down, which builds up your food, sorry. Underneath that is then micronutrients. Now, the reason why we need to have a healthy, balanced diet is because our body doesn't just need carbs, protein, and fats. It also needs micronutrients, which are things like your vitamins. So vitamin C, vitamin D, like there's, let's name all the micronutrients.
Fiber,
manganese, phosphorus, potassium,
and then, there's a lot.
Silica, like all of those bad boys. Our body needs that. Now we need to get that through a good range of different foods. And again, as natural as possible is always best.
Awesome. And so a good analogy of this one here is when you're talking about micronutrients is if I have 100 grams of carbohydrate in the form of a lolly, and I have 100 grams of apple, which is a carbohydrate, in the exact same form, so volume-wise, it doesn't really matter because inside the body recognizes it only as a carbohydrate. The difference between, and the only difference between the two that your body recognizes, that the apple comes with micronutrients. It comes with fiber. It comes with those beautiful benefits that your lolly does not come with. But from a carbohydrate point of view, they are exactly the same. The difference is that one goes in and gives you so much more bang for buck. That's what you're getting.
Cool. That makes up our food. So that gives you a bit of a deeper understanding. Now I want to move on to the next section. First of all, I just want to touch base again on brain function. Our brain only functions on carbohydrates. So when you deplete carbohydrates, you're quite literally depleting your brain's ability to function. So carbohydrates, again, are your friend. Then when it comes to the body does prefer carbohydrates. However, it will use fats as a fuel source too. You've heard of things like ketosis and the keto diet and all that kind of thing. If you're on a keto diet, the moment you introduce a carbohydrate, your body will burn that first because, again, it is the preferred source. Now, are we saying that keto can work? It totally can work. Is it sustainable? Possibly for you. However, it's quite an extreme approach.
And again, the keto diet is still calorie restriction. It doesn't mean that you get to eat all the fat, all the bacon, all the meat, all that sort of stuff all the time in large volumes. The body still needs to have a restriction on a limit, which means that you actually, if you look at fatty based foods and high protein things, they're a lot smaller in volume. So you're actually going to eat a lot less of volume, but they're still very high calories.
And then let's look at from a health point of view of what we innately know. Like if we really think about it, carbohydrates are vegetables. So we're saying high fat diet, and that means you're going to limit your vegetables, but don't we think vegetables are actually pretty good for us? So when you think about that and take some common sense to it, keto may not be the answer for you. Having a slightly higher fat intake may work for you. We'll talk about how to split up the macros and what kind of percentage split you can have and all that kind of thing. So some people do function off a little bit more fat than others for sure, but solely focusing on just fat intake, not necessarily the only way to go about it. Now, a big question is when to eat. So many people like, you can't eat after 8, you need to fast, you need 6 meals a day. No, you need 2 meals a day. What is it? The simple answer is whatever works best for you, because there's studies being done and proven that if your number is 2,000 calories, it doesn't matter how you ingest those 2,000 calories or how smaller meals you split that up into. 2,000 calories is 2,000 calories, whatever it works, however it works for you.
There's actually, sorry, real quickly, there's actually a diet called I'm pretty sure it's called the OMAD diet, 1 meal a day diet, right? That's all they do. They have all their calories in one meal. So they starve themselves all day, get to dinner. It's monstrous. It's a big, massive meal. And they sit there and they smash it and they lose weight. It's irrelevant of when and how often you spread those meals out. It's just whatever works for you. If you love a massive meal, that OMAD thing will probably work for you. If you're like us, we love to have 2 meals a day and a snack in the middle somewhere when we have our afternoon coffee. That's kind of what works for us and our routine and what we do. Some people love breakfast. We don't typically have breakfast.
Some people get hangry if they don't have food on them and they snack throughout the day rather than having big meals. It does not matter. It's whatever works for you. Because the thing is, if I tell you have to eat at 7, 10, 12, 2, and 6, if you're a shift worker, well, you are stuffed. So you've got to work out what works for you. And some people need to have more regular meals, but also maybe even you need to look at the foods that you are eating and are they giving you the best performance as well. So when to eat, I'm so sorry, there's not an exact answer. It's just whatever works for you. But you can throw out the idea of it has to be 6 meals or it can't be after 8 p.m. It honestly does not matter, because what happens if you're in a different time zone? Which 8 p.m. are we talking about? Is it only London time 8 p.m. or is it Australian time 8 p.m.? We don't know. What about when it's daylight savings? You're stuffed. Very passionate about this. So whatever works for you when it comes to when you should eat and how you should eat it. Next one I want to talk about is with food. Is food can have different responses in different bodies. What can be great for one person may not work for another, which is why food, it's not just a one size fits all. Cool. There's things like different foods create inflammation, which we've spoken about, not just fats, but also if the food doesn't agree with you, then it's going to cause inflammation in the body. And then there's also things like FODMAPs that can add to this as well. So for example, most people would consider something like broccoli like a superfood or whatever it might be, because it's green, it's good for you, all that kind of stuff. However, there is a limit for each person of how much broccoli one can eat until it becomes not so much a superfood because you're eating too much. Then it creates inflammation.
It becomes a super poo.
Super poo. Super gut because you blow up being inflamed. One thing that I've come to learn about because of necessity, I would be eating a salad and then I would get super bloated afterwards. I'm like, it's a freaking salad. Like, that's totally unfair. How can I haven't eaten anything naughty. Anyway, so I then started researching into FODMAPs. Now, FODMAPs is an acronym that stands for, I've got to read this, fermentable oligosaccharides, which is like fructans and galactose, disaccharides, which is lactose, monosaccharides, which is excess fructose, and polyols, which is sorbitol and mannitol. So these are, simply put, they're a group of carbohydrates that can trigger gastrointestinal symptoms. So this is when we talk about the foods that are making you helping you get peak performance. For me personally, garlic and onion does not help me be at peak performance unless I'm looking for peak stomach size and peak pain. That would be and breath.
Garlic breath.
Yeah, garlic breath is never nice. So having a better understanding into the foods that work for you. Again, this is why we want to get across is there's no such thing as good foods and bad. There's no such thing as bad foods. There's just too much or not the right food for you. Now, when it comes to broccoli, I can eat broccoli. However, I have a limit. When it comes to zucchini, I can eat up to 65 grams. If I go over that 65 grams, then my tummy gets sore. So understanding what your moderation is for you will also play a big part in you getting peak performance, you getting to your goals quicker and all that kind of thing too. Because if you're constantly eating foods that inflame you, inflammation quite literally means swelling, which can also mean that you look swollen. So then you feel fat, look fat, have fat days, etc. It could just be inflammation.
And I'm going to jump in here. So on that there, like Sheridan said, a great example of that is that she would eat a lot of salad. She went through a vegan phase in her life and she'd eat a lot of salads, because that's all she was kind of bracketed in at what was available. And so she's eating really healthy, but she was feeling like crap every time. So what the challenge she had was she didn't quite place the emphasis on what was in the salad to what could be causing it, because everything in it is healthy, right? All from the ground, nothing's in there other than natural foods. So what happens is people get into this sort of, I don't know what the word is here, but into this rhythm and routine that healthy foods are always good for you, but they aren't, because sometimes you can have something like Sheridan said and have a reaction to it. So you have a responsibility here, because we can't tell you what foods are going to do that for you. Only you can, but you might be turning a blind eye to it because you've always thought that garlic was a really good thing because it gives lots of flavor to food, because your mum and dad told you, friends told you, or whatever. But you might remove that garlic and all of a sudden you don't have as much inflammation in your body and you feel great all of a sudden. So the difference is that one little thing can be throwing you off, but you think everything you're eating is healthy in your eyes because of what everyone else has told you. So you have to dissect the food. If you feel like crap after eating a meal, you have to go back and go, cool, what was in it that could maybe make me feel like crap?
And this is exactly why when we do our 8-week challenges, we don't give you a meal plan and go, here's what you're eating for the next 8 weeks. First of all, it's not sustainable. Second of all, we don't know if you're vegan, if you have intolerances, if you just don't like a certain food, because again, life's too short to eat shit food. So this is why it's really important to start paying attention, because you want peak performance. You need to be putting the peak performance fuels into your body that work for you. And what Matt enjoys is actually a little bit different to what I enjoy.
So I like good food.
He likes chicken and I don't like chicken. So, you know, there's, again, we're just trying to get at the point across of food is fuel. There's no such thing as bad food. There's just too much of it. Do I eat chocolate? Hell yeah, I eat chocolate. I love my chocolate, but I have it in a limited amount because I understand that it's a simple carbohydrate. It doesn't have too many other nutritional benefits other than the fact it's literally just energy. So I don't need to eat much of it. And just like I also don't overeat on broccoli because I also know the negative effects that it has on my body too. I respect that it's food from the ground and the micronutrients that come with it, but I also understand my limit. So starting to pay attention to how you eat is also really, really important. And things like FODMAPs could really help determining what does actually work, determine what actually does work for you. Things like, you know, me discovering that broccoli wasn't so great for me in excess quantities. That was a huge winner. What else did I want to cover on this? We've
got an extended session tonight.
We really do.
Hang in there.
The next one I wanted to talk about is undereating. It is totally possible to undereat and not lose weight. Starvation doesn't mean losing weight all the time. Definitely to a point, yes. However, we need fuel in our bodies to function. Now, we also need fuel to be able to burn the fat to lose weight as well. And if you consistently undereat, your body's going to hold on to stuff and not let you lose weight.
Can I jump in there real quick too? Okay, cool. Now, when people undereat, in a Western society that we are in right now, we have a privilege and luxury of eating food all the time, right? So we're not in a starvation mode. Our body panics and thinks we are, so it starts to store things, like hibernate everything. But in a third world country where there is poverty and food restrictions and they are starving, they literally live off whatever they've got. So they're very anorexic, they're very skinny because they literally don't have the luxury of food. We do a calorie deficit, but we still have access to all these foods. So our body stores stuff because we're not in starvation. It just thinks you're starving. So it starts to pack things into fat, which frustrates people when they're not eating anything and they're still putting weight on, and it messes them up because they're just eating not enough. And the body's going, if we keep this up, we die. So let's keep storing this. And they get squidgier and they don't understand why. And as simply as increasing those calories up to a sustainable, natural, fuel-based level will actually allow the weight to drop off and wilt away.
Yes.
I think that's it.
I think that's about it. Is there any questions? I'm so sorry we've gone so long, but the food is there's a lot to cover. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to type it in the chat or do a little pick me and I can unmute you as well if it's easier for you to do that. But we want to make sure we've covered all your questions, wanting you to get a deeper understanding. And the thing is that you've got to remember too that what you know about food, you've known for however old you are. So you may have to retrain your understanding on food. Things like potatoes are not bad. Please love potatoes because we love potatoes and they will love you.
Unless when you eat potatoes, you have a reaction, then you now know. So there's no right, wrong. We just love
them.
But
you probably won't because they're delicious. But there is going to be a lot of emotional connections to food. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to work through too. We will be going deeper into the macronutrients and the mixes of it over the next couple of weeks as well. But when it comes to, I won't go into the percentage splits just yet. That comes later. But first of all, I would love you to set the task of maybe even writing down what are some of your emotional connections to foods. What are some of your food hang-ups that you have? Things like, oh, I can't eat potatoes because they'll make me fat, or, such and such is bad for me, that kind of thing. Maybe writing them down so that we can then myth bust them and work through that, understanding where you're at emotionally with food, what triggers you to eat, emotional connections and that kind of thing. Because reason why people get triggered and turn to eating when there's an emotional trigger is because it quite literally changes your state. It changes your breathing patterns, and breathing patterns can have an effect on your stress levels. It changes the hormone balance in your body and stuff like that. So understanding these triggers can also help with why maybe you're binge eating or under eating and all these kind of things. But going back to a simple understanding of food is really important, and one that we would love you to understand and learn and really know, because food shouldn't bring guilt or shame at all, and we should be eating for peak performance with whatever that is in your world.
And on what Sheridan said really quickly there, where she said write down the things that you might have a hang up with, quite often you've already got a mechanism there that defends them, so you won't actually do it. Really quick way to do it is write down 5 things you would change about your current diet that you would change, and you'll write them down naturally going, I won't have bread, I won't have this, I won't have that. Those are the things you got the hang up with. You think they're bad, and which is why you want to reduce them or cut them out of your diet, because you maybe have an ill discipline problem around them. So that's an easy way of finding the source of what you think is bad in your body. Then it's a matter of looking at it going, cool, why do you think that? So it's not as tricky as you think.
But please, if you have any other questions when it comes to food, please send them through, reach out. We're here to help. We're here to myth bust. We're here to make sure that your relationship food is a healthy one, because food is important and we don't need any extra stresses in our life. We will be covering more over the next couple of weeks as well, but please reach out if you have any other questions. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us and listening to me ramble on for quite some time. So I do apologize, I've gone so over time, but hopefully you got lots from that. Again, thank you for investing into you. If you have any questions, reach out. We love you. You rock.
Legends.
Thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. Mwah.